I believe John tentatively accepted, John from StackUp, but I think we should be ready to start. So, I mean, I didn't have any detailed agenda as such, but basically what we were discussing on the Telegram group. So I put together an initial spec based on what I read on the existing consensus mode client based setup. I don't know if that was the best format. I also had a look at Orge's Nethermind's spec version, but he told me that his spec was set up probably a year ago, and it was based or it was built into the Nethermind execution layer client. So I try to fit as much as possible from the message types from there into the new spec. But just needed to decide on from what I have analyzed, I could find that libp2p seems to have a wider support when compared to devp2p. And what I understood from Jorge is that devp2p is too uh, I mean, tightly bound with the existing client setup, but picking out bits and pieces from that to fit a new mempool might not be the best way forward. So just wanted to understand from all of you if we are in agreement in using libp2p and SSZ as the two. libp2p for the peer-to-peer protocol and SSZ for the serialization. Or do you have any comments on that?
Well, first of all, okay, we can't pick a new thing, but I'm trying to think what you're trying to accomplish. Account abstraction bundlers are separate currently. They are separate entities, but in the long term, we see them as part of the Ethereum client. So,
Right.
And this is one thing. The other thing is that we are not looking for a way to innovate in terms of a mempool. We're trying to be as good as normal mempool. We want to replace the normal mempool. So this is why I'm reluctant to use a different thing than the mempool. That said, I don't have any experience with the code of Geth or any other client. And so the say of someone who has experience with it, and preferably someone with more than one client, is better. Who on the team has experience with one or more clients?
I've used Geth quite a bit. I've even customized it for Pillar some time back, but I haven't worked on other clients.
I've looked into Geth as well, and I've also worked with a Lighthouse, so libp2p consensus networking stack a little bit. So what I think is that originally I thought the idea was to do like an extra capability on top of devp2p for the account abstraction stuff. But then again, I didn't know that it was going to be a sidecar application. So if it is a sidecar application, it might make a lot more sense to actually start with a library like libp2p, because it's a lot more customizable than just like Partha said, like using the devp2p network. It's really tightly bound to the state of Ethereum. It hasn't changed a lot. There hasn't been a lot of innovation. So I think if you have the opportunity to start from zero, it makes a lot more sense to do libp2p.
Yeah, so I agree. It's I mean, I don't have experience with either libraries, but I think since we are building a separate network, it makes sense to use. We want to use something that is battle tested, but I understand that libp2p meets that category because it's being used by the consensus layer. So I think it's if it's good enough, for the Ethereum consensus layer, it's good enough for bundlers. And and then
sorry for the ignorance. You're saying that the execution layer and the consensus layer are using different
yes,
mempools?
they do. They do.
Yes.
Yeah.
They decided, yeah, the decision was made early on to use to switch to SSZ and to libp2p. So therefore, we are using what was decided by the Ethereum community at a later point. So I think it makes sense to follow that lead, and it's also and since and the fact that there are libraries for more languages and it's more decoupled from the Ethereum clients is also a strong point, because many of the bundlers are being written in different languages. They are almost all of them are sidecars. And for example, I understand that there is no Python implementation, and there is at least one team, the Canned Wallet team, that are building a bundler in Python. So in order to be inclusive, we need to use a library that they can. So I think it all leads to libp2p. But what I would advise is to implement in the implementations, if it's possible, to keep it as a separate layer and not mix too much into it. Like when you call serialization and then send the actual message, I would try to keep it separate, so that if at a later point we decide to try another implementation, such as the experimental stuff that Tomasz suggested, then it will be easier to experiment. It will be easier to experiment, and we shouldn't make the mistake of what Ethereum did with the Dev P2P, where it's too intermingled with the client.
Yeah.
So it would make sense to keep it separated so that we can innovate in the future. Let's start with something conservative and innovate later.
So when you say, you are referring more towards the serialization, right? libp2p is something that we all agree on, but the serialization alone, whether it's SSZ or do we follow anything else or keep it open for now?
We do need to decide one way or another.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not deeply familiar with SSZ, so I don't have a strong opinion on it.
Okay.
Anyone?
Sorry, so RLP was the original encoding of Ethereum, but SSC was invented as a really like an improvement on top of RLP, because it had a lot of shortcomings. So I think SSC would definitely be the way forward.
I mean, SSD is fine, but I believe in the consensus, there are some customizations specific to the consensus layer clients, especially on to decide on what the hash should be. Are we looking, I mean, if we go ahead with SSZ, we could probably reuse the same logic that's there in the consensus layers clients to decide on what's, I believe they use the snappy compression algorithm to compress the data before it's shared. And the hashes are specified, I think, to 20 bytes the first 20 bytes of the SHA-256 hash of the message, I believe. That's used as the message ID. If we can retain the same logic for the bundlers as well, then we will be pretty much in line with what the consensus layer are doing. Again, this is something that if we all agree on, we can proceed on that.
Just one implication of using SSZ, assuming that we encode everything, assuming that we serialize everything as SSZ, is that bundlers will have to translate user operations, because user operations ultimately have to be RLP, because they are sent as part of a transaction. So it means that they would have to parse. They would have to parse and re-encode them as RLP before.
I don't understand. Where they are RLP?
Sorry?
Where they become RLP, user operation?
When you have to put them on chain in a bundle, let's say you have
not RLP, they're ABI encoded.
Oh, sorry,
encoded.
Yeah, right.
It's irrelevant. The level transfer is irrelevant.
Yeah. So they will also be they will also be similarly encoded in the network, regardless of serialization. You're right. It doesn't
come as stack JSON, and then they switch to SSZ. We are skipping RLP in the mid.
Right.
Sorry, JSON become SSZ, and then will become ABI encoded. We're skipping RLP, which is intermediate.
Okay.
Yeah, and by the way, just I'm not sure, I believe I heard somewhere a while back that RLP is actually being sort of deprecated in Ethereum clients, and like the whole, even the execution clients are looking to in the future move away from RLP. So definitely not very future proof.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So what we are saying, we are moving forward from Ethereum mempool, but towards the Ethereum consensus protocols. So we're still within the realm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, okay. So first, so we decided on using SSZ and libp2p.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's the good idea.
Yeah, I think so
Right.
too, and trying to keep it as separate as possible from the logic, so we can make changes later, and then there was, so I believe there were some comments on the document from Dror. Have they already been merged into?
Yeah, I did merge. I mean, for the benefit of others, if they don't know, I can share that link here as well. Yeah, I mean, while we are on it, I was just wondering what's the, I believe we agreed that this will be, this can be moved into ETH Infinitism's repo itself. Having said that, I don't know what is the location to move it to, and are we going to create a separate document for this, or if you can share the location, I could probably update and edit there, submit my PR there.
So I think it's, I mean, since one of the repos contains bundler, the bundler specs, and I believe the protocol is part of the bundler specs, but I would also defer this to Dror and Shahaf, who are more familiar with the structure of the various repos. Do you think it makes sense to have it as bundler specs?
The bundler spec define the schema, the JSON schema.
Yep.
It's tailored after the RPC schema of Ethereum.
It's basically like taken the clone from Ethereum's execution APIs repo, which is mostly for the RPC API and RPC spec. Now, we don't have to keep to keep that in line. We can put it there as well, and I think it's fine unless we want to add just another repo, which I'm not sure.
I mean, I picked this format from the consensus repo, Ethereum's consensus repo. So I used the same format, but I looked at the bundler spec where it was following a different thing. So I didn't know if it made sense to combine these two, but if you want me to convert this format to the one that you already have, I can do that. Or for now, while we are working on the spec, it can continue to be an MD file where I add text and then we change it later on. Would that make sense?
I think it
yes,
does.
because this protocol, the protocol has much more than just the schema.
Yeah.
Here the protocol, it is a document.
Yes.
And probably the spec is the best place for documents, though we currently don't have other spec documents, textual spec documents.
Mm-hmm.
We have the MD file of the AP itself, and all the rest are either schema files in the schema repo or Python tests when we define the test.
And these specs, the protocol specs, will also become programmatic once it makes sense. I mean, right now it's a discussion, so it's easier to use an English text in an MD file. But
yes, of course.
Once we know what it should look like, and we start tweaking it, it will become a schema. It will become a programmatic test, and it will become also part of the bundler test suite. So that
the bundler tester will test it as like Hive, as a black box.
Yeah,
it will bring any two bundlers and make sure that they can integrate with each other. And we have a spec test that define the protocol. So any two in any combination will be checked separately. So we have a clear test that they all pass it. But that again, that's the integration test. We do need the spec and some unit test level.
Right.
So for now, do we then just create a separate folder for the specs alone in ETH Infinitism, and I can just move this contents over there and then decide at a later point how you want to format
it?
I
think yes.
Yes.
Right.
Find a good place for it in the repo, and we'll push commit into that folder. Do we have any document folder in the repo?
Is that the question for Shahaf?
Shahaf, do we have anything or
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I think that we don't currently, but it's not a problem
Okay.
to add one. You can just add look at the repo and just add it to a place that makes sense, and I will just approve it.
Sure,
That's not an issue.
I'll do
Yeah.
that and let you know, Shaf.
Okay.
I'll reach out to you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, sorry, we got digressed. What was your question, Yo, when we started on the specs? Yeah, you had asked for the link, and I shared that with you. And you had
Yes.
asked whether Dror's comments have been addressed. Yes, whatever were originally sent. I mean, I had sent my comments or the questions that I had there, and I think a couple of them have already been answered. That is, I mean, the choice of libp2p and SSZ for serialization. That was my question in the Telegram group. The other, I believe, is the location which we have agreed on right now. Apart from that, I don't remember what else was. Hang on, I'm just looking at the. Yeah, there was another comment on user operation on one of the message types which I've addressed. Dror wanted me to. I mean, the get pooled user op should be based on the user op hash, or sorry, the entry point address. I've changed the message type to address that as well.
So it's based on user operation and what else?
Just where's the doc?
I
sent
just
a
shared
link.
this. Yeah, I just shared this in this Google chat as well. Do you want me?
Yeah, I'm looking.
It's on my phone, not on my
Oh,
computer.
Okay. Do you want
Where
me
do
to
I
send it
see the
again?
chat?
Okay. Can I?
Yeah.
Do you have access to Telegram? I can resend that link there.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you mean the user operation with entry point class, right?
Correct.
I'm looking at it. So it has the verified block hash, the chain ID, and the entry point. So yeah, I believe this is all we need.
Cool.
I mean, timestamp is useful, but it can be, but we have the block hash, so we don't. So timestamp is implicit.
Yeah. I mean, but we have, sorry, chain ID and block hash both have to be sent, are mandatory, right? Otherwise, I mean, is there a possibility of a collision on block hash?
No.
No. Oh wait, but and where do we put the mempool ID?
I didn't include the mempool ID. How would you generate, or I mean, is this an auto-generated field? And I had questions on that. Is it specific to the entry point contract?
It's not necessary. So it can be. You can have multiple mempools for two reasons. One reason is because you have you are using an additional a new entry point. So the old one and the new one are not the same mempool, and these are actually hard. I would call these like a hard forked mempools, because you cannot include the ops. You cannot include the user ops from these two mempools in a single bundle because they are sent to different entry points. The other kind is like a soft forked mempool. It's a mempool with a different ID because it implements different rules. For example, the max validation gas may be higher because it's a group of more powerful bundlers that have the hardware to run more simulations, or maybe it's maybe they decided to whitelist a certain audited paymaster and say this paymaster is allowed to access arbitrary state because they checked and they know that it's not going to cause any problem. But not everyone will agree to this whitelist. So in this case, they have to have a different ID, but if a bundler participates in both of these mempools, the bundler can take two user ops from these two different, because it's not enforced on chain, you can take ops from both of them and put them in a single bundle. So in that sense, it's a soft fork because it's accepted by the same entry point.
So
but
yeah.
it has to be a different ID, because if it wouldn't be, then one bundler would consider the other a spammer, because it will send it something that it considered invalid because it's only valid according to the other mempool rules. So that's why we need an ID in addition to entry point.
Yeah, can we treat this like a version ID? I think in consensus layer thing, they have for each message type, they have something called as a version ID, and which could be an upgrade.
I think it's okay. Go on.
No, version ID are tricky because you try to define them as linear, or you start to define what is considered. It's very tricky. It cannot even be same.
Yeah,
so I don't think that anything more than an arbitrary hash, like
how do we generate this hash? I mean, who generates?
My suggestion is that whoever creates an ID, we will start with a public one. We'll create a document to describe it as technical as possible, but it's still an MD document. Publish it on IPFS and hash that. This is the group ID. We will have one defined for the initial version.
Yeah, it can be a document. Basically, it's a document defining the rules. It says our rules say that we are whitelisting paymaster with that address, and it's allowed to access this slot. I don't know, whatever. It can even be a text. It doesn't even have to be structured. And then this document is hashed. Yes. This is the ID.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And we publish it somewhere, whether it's a repo, IPFS, or it has to be published somewhere, and this becomes the canonical ID for this mempool. If it's ever changed, then it's a new mempool with a new ID.
Also, by the way, it might also mean that we have different mempool IDs for different networks, because we do have different parameters.
So yeah, actually, you can concatenate the chain ID.
Actually, it means you can do whatever you like. We will try to create the first initial version. We'll try to have several networks into it, because one of the parameters that will be written, that have to be defined in a mempool, is what is the required stake. How much is a stake? What is a good stake? Stake time is probably 1 day, but how much is a stake value? $1,000. But it has to be specified in a native token. How much? I have no good value for it right now, and we don't want to change it often. So we
I mean, why are we referring to a stake here? You mean the paymaster stake?
Yes. If it needs one.
Yes, if it needs one. Actually, we might raise it, because it's okay to be quite high, because we found out that in many cases, paymasters and aggregators and factories don't need any stake. They can very easily work with no stake at all. If they do need centralized configuration, then they will need to have a stake. So we defined it. So the new version of the EAP defines clearly what the rules are. When an entity needs to be staked. But then when it needs to be staked, which is now no longer the norm, but if something does need to be staked, then we need to define what the stake is, and it may be different. For example, on Ethereum with DeFi, you want to keep it you want to keep it high, but maybe on some gaming chain. Maybe on some gaming chain you want to keep it lower. I don't know. So it's not for us to decide. So this should be a part of this document. At some point, maybe we'll even define a structure for this document, which will include things like the stake, and then any bundler can decide which ones to subscribe to, which mempool IDs to subscribe to. It will also allow us to allow bundlers to more rapidly experiment, because you can always add another stake to your another ID to your bundler.
Right.
So you start with the default one. But let's say tomorrow we chat on the group and we say, I think we could change this rule. So now we create a document that describes this rule. Everyone applies it, and everyone who knows how to apply the new rules just adds the new ID. It's
Right.
just adding ID. So it will make it much easier for us to experiment if we ever think we can change the rules, which I
Right.
believe we can at some point.
So the document that we are planning to put into IPFS, the hash of that would be used as a mempool ID, right? That's what we are agreeing on.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And are we looking to pin these documents that we push to IPFS as well, or is that a mandatory check? Are we going to check whether documents still exist on IPFS, or it's just for the initial phase?
It
Right,
might
so,
be a good idea to pin them somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, we should pin them, but we should also have a copy of them. Each such document should also be pushed into the specs repo as a PR.
Yeah.
So we should have a copy, and then even if nobody pins it and it gets
Yes.
lost, anyone can verify it and repin it if necessary
Fair enough.
by
Yeah.
taking it from the specs repo.
So yeah, cool.
So we
That-
we always have a backup in the repo.
all right, makes sense.
Yes, we have a decentralized system, but just in case it is not good enough, we will have a backup in a GitHub. Yes,
Yeah,
sounds great.
And you technically you could put the entire document on chain. It's just expensive at the moment, but maybe after dunk sharding, we could actually put it on Ethereum.
Actually, you can put it. You can. I think that for that purpose, we can trust other networks. You know, I think
Yeah.
Arbitrum is trustworthy enough to put a full document.
Oh no, let's put it
Or
on
even Nova.
Solana. It will be cheaper.
No, we're
Right.
still promote only EVM-based
It is very good.
account abstraction.
Okay, so I'll then be including mempool ID to each of the each of those message types, right? Or yeah, it would be apart from chain ID, we'll also be having a mempool ID returned. So does that mean we should have a separate message to fetch user operations specific to a particular mempool ID as well? Get and apart from contract entry point contract address, should we have one for mempool ID too?
Actually,
Yes.
this is a question of the dev P2P. If a mempool ID, okay, we have n bundlers. Some of them support, all of them support the public mempool, and some
Yep.
of them support other mempools.
Right.
So I wonder what is the best way using, again, I'm not familiar with the P2P API, but if you have some notion of channel, then if mempool ID can be a channel, so you simply subscribe to all those channels and seamlessly they all become part of your mempool. It is your responsibility to publish, of course, a new user upon the right channel.
Right.
But that's your responsibility. Otherwise, you become spammer on the other side.
Yeah, I think on consensus layer they come up as gossip sub messages. So I think a topic corresponding to each mempool ID, I believe, would make sense.
Okay.
Now
On top of the other topics, then, because you already have a lot of other topics.
Other topics.
So
that's
it should be like so the topics we have now, like new user ops and pooled user ops, it should have a parameter for subscribing to those messages with a set mempool ID.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Again, in addition to what types?
So right now, the gossip sub messages that are defined in the current P2P spec, they should have also. So when a bundler wants to subscribe to those messages, it sends out requests to the currently connected peers to subscribe to those. But it should also have a parameter specifying which chain ID it wants to receive them for.
About chain ID, I'm not sure that.
Oh, sorry, I meant mempool ID. My bad.
Okay. Because the gossip is or a single chain. I think that.
Yeah.
I want to now an implementation question, maybe not related directly to the protocol. So we are defining these different IDs, but we do have we do plan to have one that is sort of the canonical, the one that implements the rules from the EIP. So now let's say a bundler receives a bundler receives a user op, and it sees the user op came from one of the smaller mempools, but it actually fits the canonical one, or it fits a wider one. Would it propagate it? Would it propagate it for the same mempool identity it got, or maybe it says this actually doesn't need special rules. This user op could be in the canonical, so I'm going to propagate it in the canonical so it reaches a wider audience. So do you think bundlers should propagate with the same ID, or should they make a determination?
I mean, if you were to give this control to the bundlers to specify or change the mempool ID, then it could we could lead to bad actors doing something right incorrectly, or even an incorrect implementation choosing to send
Let
it
me
to a
ask.
No, but they
Let
would
me
get.
ask. Let me ask a different
they would
question.
get,
No, Yoav, let me ask a different question.
Okay.
If a bundler receives a request through an RPC call, to which mempool should it send it? Is it to the most public one? Like, okay, we say, I believe that we will say that if it's supported by the public mempool, it should send it over the public mempool. But if there are several, I think that's obvious because we want to promote the public one. But let's say there are several private ones, and it is supported by multiple of them. To which one of them should he send it? And should it matter? Because I don't think that we can mandate.
We can't mandate it, but I think the implementation that makes sense is to have them prioritized, to have them the ordered list. So you have the highest priority, the highest, for each when in the bundler setup, when you set up your bundler, you have the canonical first, and then you have a list of other IDs that you're also willing to accept. So I think it should be like it's like first match. So it's first match. It's not since there's no notion of best match because it's a Boolean. It's either it matches or it doesn't. So I think first match would make sense here. See if it matches so I mean if it doesn't match anything, you drop it. But if it matches the canonical, put in canonical. If not, then in the second and so forth. So,
no, but my definition of okay, we agree on the first. But my definition of second and your definition of second might be different. So I don't think we can mandate who is defined as second. Maybe in these documents, when we publish them, we can say this is the public mempool, and someone will find let's say that there is a reason for an alternate mempool is that if there is some very interesting paymaster mechanism that can't be verified by our rules and requires auditing. So there are one or two paymaster over there, and this is a secondary mempool. Okay, so we define this as a high priority because it is not part of the public one, but we still promote this one. But who define for project-specific mempools? Who can define the order? Why this is the second and not that?
I think maybe I'm trying to think about it from the standpoint of the user. What's the best thing for the user? And the best thing for the user is to always have the user operation on the network with the most bundlers, right? So if you have so maybe you can do it now. You don't see the entire network as a node, but you do see your peers. So you know how many of your peers. How many peers you have that subscribe to a certain ID. So I think it would make sense to send it. I mean, if it matches multiple mempools, you want to send it to the one that has the most peers, because you know how many you're going to propagate it to. So send it to the one. Send it to the ID that you can where you can reach the largest number of peers. Does that make sense?
No, wait.
Yeah, and perhaps you can optionally let the user specify an alternative mempool ID for if they want to actually send it to another mempool instead of the canonical one.
If the user does not specify, we choose the default mempool. But if the user chooses a different one, we honor it. Or are you suggesting we don't honor in case we find it's not relevant to the? But that would increase the complexity of validation on the bundler, right? Because each bundler can arbitrarily decide which, as Dror said, which mempool should a particular user op be redirected to.
The reason for different mempools are, I don't think it's that complex, because I don't know of other implementation. The way we have in our bundler is that we have the heavy tracing mechanism, which collects information.
Right.
And the reason for accepting or not accepting for specific mempool is whether it uses specific addresses.
Yep.
Widely specific addresses, which otherwise this request would be rejected because it accesses storage that it is not allowed. So there is not much complexity in checking a bundle. You don't do you don't have to do full validation because there is the heavy collecting of information and then a very light way scanning through them and finding if it violates one of your rules. That's the term of complexity. It's not a real. You do need to find some order. The suggestion you have said something like a good idea to start with, like it's a should send to the most useful mempool.
Right.
And
I'm
not sure whether a user should write anything about it.
No, yeah, that's the current RPCs don't have this, don't have the notion of mempool IDs, only entry point, right?
Right.
Yes.
So we didn't give the user a way to say it. And if the user tries to send it to a bundler through RPC, if the RPC accepts it, it knows which rules it accepted it by. And if it doesn't match the rule, then it returns an error to the user. So the user doesn't even know which pool it's, which rules it matched.
Oh, so based on the contract, it will send it to a certain mempool ID, maybe.
So yeah, bundler implementers can choose to decide which mempool ID the request should be forwarded to. Based on, I can think of a use case from specific to Etherspot or Pillar. We've had several smart wallets released over the years. So one user can have multiple smart wallets. So we were considering a possibility that when we release a new 4337 compatible wallet, their existing smart wallets can continue to be their paymasters for new user ops. So if in such a scenario, the user, our SDK would choose whether, depending on who the paymaster is, whether the request has to be forwarded to the common mempool or to a specific mempool specific to our use case.
I'm trying to understand the rationale because, of course, the user will send a request to an RPC call that accepts this paymaster. For the user, it's a yes or no, because you will not send to someone who rejects. But once you reached this node, you don't care about the internals of what mempool it uses to broadcast it. You contact the node because this is the node that supports your network in its best way, and this bundler will send it to the best of its knowledge to the largest network that supports this paymaster. So by the fact that I use this bundler, I authorized this bundler to propagate it for me. So if there is a change in mempool IDs, it's something internal for bundlers. So I, as a user, need to know a bundler that will accept me, but I don't think I should care more about it.
Right. So
that's
it
like
is
you
more...
don't care nothing about it. Yeah.
So you're saying that the user does not need to know about the mempool ID that he or she is forwarding the request to, but it's the bundler which takes the decision on behalf of the user.
Yes.
The user does know about entry point. The user has to know about it because this is covered by the signature.
Right.
So you can get when you contact when you connect an RPC node. You ask, you can get a list of supported entry points, which usually would be one, but it could be more. And then you can select the right entry point for your account. You select it, and you include this in the RPC request. So basically, so you have to tell it which, it has to be a mempool that uses this entry point.
Right.
But for the ID, we can leave it to the bundler because it's not covered by the user signature, and there is nothing to gain by asking the user to specify it.
Right.
Yes, and removing configuration for the users, we already have far too much. This is something we want to reduce. So only if something bring security issues or bring a value to the user, will add it visible value to the user. And here the bundlers bring the value to the user.
Yeah, so it has always been a part of the one of the design goals was to handle as much complexity as possible in the bundlers, so that users don't have to deal with complexity, and if possible, account developers also don't have to think about it. So bundlers have to take as much complexity as possible upon themselves to if they can handle it. So this is something that clearly could be handled by the bundlers.
Okay.
Oh, and so when you connect a node, when you connect another peer, is there a message where you query it to get which IDs it support? When you discover peers, you need to know it's similar to capabilities. You need to know which mempool IDs it support, and then and of course the intersection with yours need to be as large as possible, and in any case larger than 0.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, I'll add this.
Yeah,
sorry.
So in Lighthouse, it's just done with a status message, and I think in DevP2P it's actually the same thing. So you specify the status message, and in it you tell them which capabilities that you support, and in this case we can do mempool IDs.
Mempool ID,
and then you select the overlap, and that's the capabilities of your actual connection. So in the handshake process, that can be incorporated.
Yep, makes sense. The other question I had was on boot nodes for the new P2P setup. I mean, I couldn't get information on the consensus layer boot nodes at all, but I could find that for execution layer. So is anyone aware of what the boot nodes for the consensus layer clients are? Because the information is not publicly available.
Yeah, as far as I know, each of the client teams maintains a few of them, and actually, a friend of mine just published about it at ETH Research and ranted about having.
Yeah, I saw that on Hetzner. He said we shouldn't be considering Hetzner, but that's more. All of them were about execution layer, not about consensus layer clients.
Oh, it was about. I don't remember. Yeah, you are right. I think, but anyway, we have so. There should be boot nodes, but when we discussed it on the group, remember I suggested that maybe it would make sense to have the IP and port or even an enode record. I mean, what if bundlers when they send the bundle, they would send an enode record, they would append it to their call data. So it's not very large. It's not a lot of call data, and then it means that you don't need to worry about boot nodes at all. You can always look at the last few blocks, find all the bundlers that submitted bundles, and try them. So even if many of them are spammers and the record is incorrect, at least as long as there was one honest bundler, you'll be able to find your way into the network.
Yeah, but peer discovery could become a challenge in such a case, right? Without a boot node, peer discovery, I mean, what if we do not find a valid active bundler that's online for a while? Then we would end up with isolation of a particular user op request. I'm just concerned on that fact.
You could do DNS discovery as well in the beginning.
Yes,
because that would also help a lot with initial bootstrapping, and you won't have to set up your own bootstrap nodes for that. So I think that's probably an option.
Yeah, but wouldn't that be a variation to how consensus layer clients do node peer discovery? Then, if we are looking to be aligned to the way how Ethereum works, then we should be in alignment here as well.
Right. We should use the same method. So what I suggested is not having this method of appending enode record as the primary method. It's an additional protection. Since our mempool initially will be smaller than Ethereum's, it will be so if you can't find the boot nodes for whatever reason, it will be harder to reconnect with the network than with Ethereum. So it's just a shortcut. it gives us another layer of defense that you can
Got
have that you can find a record on chain. I don't know if we should do it because it adds some cost to the bundler, and it's not really used on chain. So I'm still I'm undecided whether I like the idea of doing it or not. But it's possible to add it as another layer.
So can we then, for now, go ahead with the assumption that each bundler client would have their own boot node setup, but we'll defer the decision of additional modes probably for a later point of time once we have more clarity on how we're going to proceed.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. We need to we need to find out more to learn more about how it works with the consensus layer.
Yeah.
How the boot nodes work there, and then we'll take it from there.
Do you or any one of you have contacts with the existing Lighthouse or Prism guys or someone who can help us here on how they set up? Because I couldn't find any information online.
I don't really know. I mean, it has to be hard coded in the client.
Touch with Lodestar.
Sorry, Christoph?
I'm happy to put you in touch with Lodestar, by the way. I know a few people from there.
Oh, okay.
Your microphone is bad. Can you repeat?
I'm trying it. I'm happy to put you in touch with Lodestar.
Okay, now it's worse.
Yeah,
no, he says that he knows people at Lodestar and he can get us in touch with them.
Okay.
Yeah, Christoph, that will be really helpful. So if we can get in touch with at least one of these consensus layer clients, it will be pretty helpful. We can then set up our own boot nodes in the same format as well. Yeah.
Right, I think it makes sense. So did we cover everything?
I guess so. Yeah, I think the other one was specific feedback on each of the message type or topics that we already discussed. So we got that as well. So what's the next step? Do you want this to be this meeting to be a weekly thing or a bi-weekly thing? How would you like to proceed going forward?
I don't know. It's we don't know what's our velocity here. You know
yeah.
So we can start and adjust it as we go. So do you want the next one to be in a week or in 2 weeks? And then we'll see how much we have to discuss every week or every 2 weeks.
Or I could probably.
Sorry. I would say the law of meetings is very important here. If we do every week, it's going to stay every week. Whereas if we do every 2 weeks, it's a lot easier to move it up to every week afterwards, right? So it's really difficult to decrease the meetings we have.
Yeah, and then and if we do it every 2 weeks starting today, then at least we don't overlap with all core devs, because all core devs is every 2 weeks and there is one next week on Thursday.
Are you happy with this time zone, or are you all? I mean, I know Christoph, Jonas, and myself are in GMT or GMT +1. I don't know about the rest of you. Are you happy with this time?
GMT +2. It's a bit late.
Oh, okay. I chose
11,
this. Sorry about that. I chose this time because I thought at the previous kickoff meeting, this was the ideal time. So we could probably do it much earlier if all of us are in agreement.
Sounds good.
I rather have it earlier as well.
Yeah. I'm fine with the current time or with an earlier time too. That's also okay.
An hour or two earlier would be better, but
5 or 6 p.m. GMT, would that be okay with everyone?
6 p.m. would be good.
Okay, sounds good. Okay.
6 p.m. GMT?
Yeah.
Which is also UTC. That's UTC.
UTC, yeah.
Same, yeah.
How many time back from now?
So that's nearly 4 hours.
3 hours.
4 hours.
Ahead.
4 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
4 hours.
12 minus 4, it's 8 o'clock here.
Should we call this all ERC 427 core devs or something to make it a bit more?
Sounds good to me. I can do that. I'll send out the invites then again.
I'm subscribed to the Ethereum protocol calls calendar. So I have many of these. Usually it's called implementers call. So there's like a EAP 4844 implementers call. there's a EOF implementer calls the consensus layer. And so I have a,
Why? But core dev is cooler.
Yeah, no, all core devs seem to be the exception. But yeah, we can
We have some core devs. We have some core devs, not
some
all.
core devs. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So for now, we are happy to maintain the same set of participants, but we can slowly start to add on others if they show interest. Is that okay? Because I'm conscious of the fact we shouldn't add too much noise to already confusing set of discussions.
Yes.
Something.
All right. Any other questions or any other actions? So I'll send out the invites for the week after next for 6 p.m. Again on Thursday. I'll create a PR and send, add this particular version of the document with other changes that we just discussed and send to you, Shah, for approval. And then you can add it to the other spec as well.
Sure.
Is there anything else I missed? Yeah, and Christoph will put us in touch with someone at Lodestar so that we can get an understanding of how they have set up the boot nodes as well.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.